Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. My guests are subject matter experts whose unique perspectives will help listeners understand how the issues impact them. Let's get into The Real Spill. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And with me today is one of my very favorite people in multifamily and a sister of my heart, Victoria Cowart. Welcome, Victoria.
Hey, Katie. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is fun. I love that picture behind you. Is George blowing a bubble?
He sure is. He absolutely is. Yes.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, I wanted to make my home office a little like Americana, tongue-in-cheek. Of course, I have the quote by Reagan here, and then George is over here blowing his bubbles. And I've got a picture of Marilyn Monroe over there, just little things. And of course, I'm a hip-hop head, so I have a "It Was All a Dream" sign over here too, as one does.
Love it. Love it. A little piece of you behind you.
Yes. And thank you again for joining me today. We just had the talk of educating the people. So that is what we are here to do, to talk about housing affordability today. And I know that listeners are going to gain a great deal of knowledge from your experience and your journey in multifamily and learn more about you. And I don't think people know how hard you work on the regular, even as to what we were just talking about off camera. Like, you just hosted a senator in your house yesterday. And
it's a wild ride.
It is, but it's the work that has to be done, and it's the stuff done behind the scenes. And we need more people to take up the charge and be in lockstep with us if we want to protect our industry. So why don't we start with telling us how you got into the industry? That wasn't the original career plan, was it?
So actually, no, it was. I am a unicorn. If you ask folks in the room, any given room, how many folks in the room got into property management on purpose, you probably find 10% of the folks in the room did that. And that's what I did. So I was a teenager working in a couple of the businesses near my home. And I met two folks in the property management business, two maintenance staff members, John and Ed. They liked their work. So I thought I'd explore a job with that company who they worked for, so I could work for them during the day and go to college at night, because I knew that was going to be my path. So I called one of the three owners of that family-run business. They owned 2 shopping centers in town and 4 apartment communities. And so I called him and asked him about his staffing and any job openings, and he had nothing available. With what I knew about his staffing, though, I kind of asked him to create a job for this little 18-year-old leasing agent who'd never leased anything before. But I asked him to create a job for me, essentially. And so he said, "I'll give you an interview." And I met him for the interview, and he gave me the keys to his model apartment for his new lease up at the time, 300 plus unit community in West Ashley. And he said, "Go look at the model and come back and sell it to me." And I said, "Okay." So I went and did that. I came back and I sold him the model. He said, "You're hired." And it was the start of a journey that has now lasted, next year will be 40 years, or this year, I guess, would be 40 years. So it was 1986 when I got in the business. And it was a really different industry at that time, but still providing housing for folks, treating them well, providing them with good maintenance and great experiences, and working with your team to offer the best in housing, and helping encourage people to choose yours and to trust you and to want what you have, and to be willing to rent it from you. All those things remain true today, but it's been a crazy, fabulous ride.
Yes, for sure. And like I said, you are a unicorn. I think you're the very first person I have ever known. And I don't know why I thought you started in education.
No, I was 18 years old as a leasing agent, but maybe because I was going to college while I started in the business, it was my education. Maybe that's where that got lost in translation. I was educating myself, or getting educated here locally at our technical college shortly after getting into the business, and then went on for a different degree. My path into the industry was, I'll need a great job during the day so I can go to college at night and, really develop my life plan, so to speak.
And that's awesome that you paved your own way, that you said, "No, let me show you what I can do." Like that is a very, in my opinion, from knowing you, a very Victoria thing that you're like, "No, I've got this. Let me show you."
Yeah, so Norman Nierenblatt gave me my first chance in this industry, and he's so appreciated to this day for taking a chance literally on a kid. I was like, you need an extra person in your staffing plan. I see a role for me. Let me come chat with you. And he said yes. I'm like, what were you thinking, Norman? But thank you.
And it's so important to remember those people as we go on through our careers. And I'm sure you have been that person for many people along the way. That's the good stuff in the industry. We get to pay it back.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And taking folks and looking at what they're doing out there in the world before they apply to this industry and seeing those transferable skills and being able to envision their future and then to help them take those first steps on it. Absolutely replicated, hopefully I replicated what Norman did for me, for many others. That's my hope.
We leave it better than we found it and pour into people as much as we can. The industry's under attack, and what you said is so much the truth. Like what's out there about the big bad landlord is a false narrative. It's just what you said.
Yeah, it is a false narrative. The term landlord is just in and of itself, the history of that word is just rife with negativity. And that's not what we do. People need homes. We help them discover our homes, learn about our homes, help encourage them to choose our homes, and then we serve them in those homes. There's absolutely nothing negative about that. It is a wonderful service. Folks have to have a place to live, and they need professional property managers to help them have that if they're renters. And that's what this industry provides. We provide an essential service. I think we're housing heroes, frankly.
Absolutely. We sure are. And the housing providers that are out there that are listening are likely going to say, yes, this is us. This is exactly what we do every day. Our industry is so unique and different from real estate, where when you're signing on the dotted line, sometimes that's the end of your relationship with your realtor for the time being until you go to another transaction in the future. But with multifamily, oh no, now that's where it starts. That is, okay, everything that I've told you this community is going to be, now here's where the rubber meets the road. This is
now
where
it's time to deliver. Yeah. There's discussion before they move in. Then there's delivery on the day of move in and for every day thereafter. This is not like being a realtor. This is not like a short-term rental, like a hotel motel. Folks are checking in and checking out. I get it. But, for us, we have a long-term relationship where folks can walk into our offices and communicate with us, the good, the bad, the needs, the joys. So it's a definitely different relationship in this industry. And I think it's one that I always cherished.
Me too. It was never lost on me that they could have chosen anywhere in the whole area to live, but they chose our community. And I was going to remind them of why every chance that I got.
Yeah, that's a great point that you're making, reminding them of why. That should be on everybody's lease renewal plan in the industry, your marketing plan for your lease renewals. Remind them why. I think that's a really great line, Katie. Good for you.
Every now and again, I come up with something, but it's something I've actually always used. And you're like me, where you fell so in love with it. And you're probably like me in this too. We had this conversation when I made the transition. How tough was it?
It was a little tough. I will say, going from property management to supplier. But interestingly, I did it the same way I got my first job. I contacted John Bradford, our CEO and founder, brilliant, and he's in the political world too. So it was so much fun contacting John. I had met him before. Graciously, Pat Patterson, who was with Pet Screening for a very long time, one of our foundational team members, introduced me to John at a region meeting while I was an NAA RVP. So then net weaving, John Michaels reintroduced me. John Michaels from Watchtower Security, precious person, reintroduced me to John. And then John and I had a conversation. And it was a lot like the one I had with Norman. Here's who I am. Here's what I've been doing. I'm thinking about the supplier side. And I've always said to myself, it would have to be with a supplier I would value, a partner I would value. If I were still making the decision for portfolios as I had been, it has to be one I would value. And so we got to talking, and that's how I came on board here at Pet Screening. But to your point earlier about education, for about 9 years while I was leading a portfolio, I taught at night several times a year for the Charleston Trident Association of Realtors. I am licensed still to this day to teach half of the property management licensing course. Well, I teach the whole course, but I always taught half the course. My teaching partner, mentor, and friend, Judy Wolk, who got me into it, would teach half, and she's an attorney, and I would teach the other half. So I arrived at Pet Screening in the start of 2021, became a dual role member of of this team, standing up an education program and functioning as a member of the sales team. I'm sure I've onboarded more than 500,000 units in this time span with pet screening. But it was a process, had to learn some new technological skills to do the job, had to get through the NAAEI faculty training, in addition to the training and licensure process that I had for South Carolina. And then, of course, I had to learn all about our services. And I, of course, wanted to immediately start bringing my experience from the property management industry to this service, how we're presenting it and positioning it, and how we're sharing it with our friends and future clients and current clients, and, wrap all that into a brand new position at pet screening that really I was the first person to have and am the first person to have here at pet screening.
That's amazing. And I think everything that I learned about ESAs and service animals, I learned from you. And a lot of it was before you were doing the job, even before you came to pet screening and were advocating here, in South Carolina, that we needed, there was help needed. You saw an area of the market that needed help and married the two together.
Yeah. I've always had a legal brain. I've always teased that if I hit the lottery, I would go to law school. Years ago, dear friend Patty Crawford would always say to me, we just have to find 10 or 20 people willing to support you with 10 or 20 grand each. And then you can offer them double back in legal fees. We need to send you to school, Victoria. The industry needs you. So I always function as the adjunct friend attorney. If folks would call me and say, what about this? What about that? Most impressive day was when Chairman Mike Holmes called me one day to ask me a question of kind of a legal nature. And I was like, this is so fabulous. It was so much fun. So I always liked digging into the minutia of the different things. I think my first case that I went to court had to prepare to go to court with was, I was probably 20, 21 years old, going to court to discuss an eviction. And the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, which is now the Service Member Civil Relief Act, was going to be the defense on the part of the defendant who had not paid their rent. And I knew I was going to go in front of a magistrate and had to read that and learn about that and decide, did that apply, didn't that apply, and how I was going to argue that in front of the magistrate. So this business trains you by necessity from an early age to know the legalities of what we're doing. Otherwise, you won't succeed. You'll go to court and you won't have anything to say. And that's just never a good place to be. Unless you're working with great people like Loebsack, Brownlee, Whitlow, Prate, and then you can sit there without having to say anything. But back in that day, we didn't have all those fabulous folks.
No, not at all. Not at all. Even as I was coming up, I started in 2002 when I was 18, and it was me. There was no law firm available. It was us going and talking about the SCRA. It's interesting now, I'm not working on the cases anymore, but when I was, that there still needs to be education of our magistrate judges in the state of South Carolina as it relates to the SCRA. And I've even had clerks say, oh, y'all can send it. We don't use it. We don't need it. And we're like, la, 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 la.
I did not hear that. I did not hear that.
It's a federal law.
Yeah, that should not be a thing. Well, I will tell you, the House Republican caucus here in South Carolina has put out their 6 pillars for progress. And I thought I saw on here, yes, under their 5th pillar, prioritizing public safety and law and order policies, is reform our county magistrate selection process. So I'm not sure what that will hold for us and for our industry, but that will be something to keep our eyes on.
For sure. And I know folks will listen to this from all over the country. You want to tell them how magistrates are elected in South Carolina and the problem that we have with that?
So magistrates are appointed actually essentially by the delegation in each county. There's not a great budget for this, so they're not attorneys. So they're lay people trained for their role to be a judge and to adjudicate cases that come before them of all sorts, whether it's traffic cases or criminal domestic violence cases or ejectment cases in our experience in our industry. So we have that challenge that they are lay people, but that's not the challenge that's insurmountable, right? But we have the challenge that there's not a great budget for them and they are appointed by the delegation. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the things I remember reading was that they didn't even have to disclose to the delegation, and I don't know that the delegation is alerted to it, if there's any disciplinary action taken against them while they're on the bench. So there's a communication challenge there as well. So it'd be interesting to see what the House does with that. But I don't want to get too far into the minutia for your listeners, because if you're not a legal geek, this will be the point at which your eyes roll back in your head. We need to do that CPR on them right about now.
Yeah, it's definitely been a topic of conversation in South Carolina over the past couple of years, for sure. If folks want to read more about it, all you have to do is Google it. If you're interested, the information is out there. And we've talked about the legal minutia and that kind of comes along with this. And you found yourself along the way becoming passionate about industry advocacy. At what point in your career was it that you're like, oh, okay, this needs to happen? And you're incredibly effective at it.
Well, listen, everybody in this business can be effective at advocating for the industry, because what do? We lease apartments. What do you have to do? Formulate a relationship with that individual, in such a way that they believe, of course, that you are a genuine person, genuinely caring about their housing choices, genuinely wanting to help them make a great one, and then to serve them and or their families throughout the years, right? That's what we do is in this industry. And if you enjoy doing that and you appreciate that that's what you do, then you are absolutely someone who should be advocating for the industry, because it is the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. A genuine person, genuinely caring about the industry and the future of housing in this country, forming a relationship with elected officials, and then advocating, renting an apartment, advocating for your industry. Same thing. So I got into that a little bit in my early years serving with the local apartment association. There was a different apartment association here in the Charleston area at that time. It then folded itself into the Charleston Apartment Association, which I was one of the 2 or 3 founding members of. Involvement with the local and then with the state association through friend and mentor, property management mentor Mike Holmes. With the state association, I began to attend NAA events. I think in 2000 was probably my first apartmentalize and advocate and things of that nature. That's when my fire for advocacy kind of hit the 3-alarm level. In particular, the full aha moment was sitting in the Pentagon City Ritz-Carlton, which is where we used to have the Capitol Hill Conference, and in a room, in an area on one of the floors, there was a sofa and a couple of chairs, and some of us from South Carolina were just sitting there. And I realized how it was all connected. You ever have string art when you were a kid? Did you ever make string art? Mm-hmm. And as you're putting the strings around the pegs and connecting them all, the picture becomes clear. I felt like it was a moment of string art where I could string all the threads around all the pins on the board and see the picture. It really was that aha moment. It was at Advocate, which we then called the Capitol Hill Conference. This year, Advocate is March 25th and 26th. Then the governance meetings are the 27th and 28th. This year it's called Building Consensus. Registration's open now. It's a free event. So if you're interested in this industry and some of the best minds in the industry and wanting to be around those folks, if you're new in the industry, this is the place to go. I don't think people think of it that way, but they ought to. It'll be held at the Grand Hyatt in Washington, which is a great facility. Again, that's March 25th and 26th. So Google NAA Advocate 2025, and you'll find out everything you need to know about it. But that's really where it kind of all came together. The picture all came together for me. It really was quite magical.
And you are so connected with your local delegations, state and federal. And these things take time too. So what would you say if folks were hitting a roadblock, like, hey, I'm reaching out, but I'm not hearing anything back? Just what steps should they take next?
So it depends upon who they're trying to communicate with, right? What they have to keep in mind. If you're talking about your county council, that's one set of demands on their time. If you're talking about your school board in your county, that's another set of demands, right? And another set of opportunities. So if you're trying to do something at the local level where they have an audience, start showing up in the audience. Start listening to what they're doing. If you're passionate about school board, it's school board. If you're passionate about county issues, development in your county, that's right there for us in our industry, right? You can also do that with your city council. Show up at their meetings. If you want to develop those relationships, show up at their meetings, especially be mindful of what's coming up on their agenda. It's not hard to do. You can call the clerk and ask them to add your name to the agenda distribution, or you can keep an eye on it online. There's an opportunity for public comments at the beginning or end of these meetings, whether it be school board or city or county council. You can offer public comments on something that's a passion for you. And then you can follow up. Is that board what we call at large, where it represents the whole area, or are there precincts or districts? That determines your approach as well, who you're going to ask to communicate with. So you have to look at the body that we're talking about, again, school board, county council, city council, or are you talking about wanting to formulate a relationship in the General Assembly with your member of the House or the Senate? Get to know who they are. Download the app for that, for the South Carolina Legislative app. Find your member of the House, find your member of the Senate, tag their name in the app and learn about the bills that they're signing on to or that they are offering and sponsoring, and use that as your connection point. Just random angry emails, for instance, not the way to go. Connecting with them positively before you have any ask, supporting something that they're putting out there is the best way to do it. Again, whether it's school board, county council, city council, or the General Assembly. And then, of course, there's the members of the South Carolina congressional delegation, your member to the U.S. House, and our two members to the Senate. So folks have to know where it is they'd like to communicate, begin communication before there's ever an ask, begin it on a positive note, celebrating or thanking them for something that they've done that you appreciate, and then continuing from there. And at a certain point, after you've communicated a few times that way, maybe you've even shown up for comments again at one of your local bodies, or you've asked your member of the House or Senate, I'm going to come up and listen in the gallery because this is so interesting to me. Would you recognize me in the gallery as one of your constituents? After you've been positive and communicating with them email-wise for some time, that's a great way to build your rapport with them well before there's ever any ask. You have to be willing to put in a little effort. And then, of course, getting the folks who you appreciate the positions of, helping them get elected. Are you supporting them in any way when they're running? That is how you get to the top 1% of the people any elected leader is willing to communicate with, by supporting them. And there's plenty of things you can do that cost you only your time, not your treasure, or you could offer both time and treasure. And it could be a small donation as well as offering to help them with their campaign. And there's so many ways you can do that are so akin to our industry, that dial right into our skill set in this industry, that there's no reason not to do it. And our industry lives or dies on ordinances and regulations and legislation. I didn't realize for many years, but when I got into the business about 16 years before you, Katie, gosh, you look so fresh. So when I got into the business until many years later, I didn't realize that I'd gotten in on the heels of the Tax Reform Act of 1986. Oh my goodness. It was no wonder you practically had to ask permission to buy a postage stamp for years. That one act hit this industry with 3 gut punches that upended properties and deals that penned no longer penned. Properties were essentially just given back because they no longer made any sense because of what was done in our tax treatment of this industry. 3 gut punches. Y'all research that one. I don't want to roll your eyes back in your head, but the Tax Reform Act of 1986, read it. Just read any article about it. Absolutely death blows to this industry at that time.
And is this what we're looking at facing in this year as we're talking tax reform, or is this something different?
I don't think that we're looking at that, but you can't ever, rest your head, regardless of what party you belong to. Who was the president then? I believe it was Ronald Reagan. And I don't believe that our industry was at the table advocating and doing what we do now in any way, shape, or form. I think that, these things just snuck up and bit us. And I'm so thankful that that's not something that, I think can really occur at this time, because we have so many fabulous partners out there, from the National Apartment Association to the National Housing Council, NMHC, National Multi-Housing Council, to IREM and SAMA and NAMA and NARPM, the Association of Realtors, on some issues. So we've got a lot of fighting partners now that we didn't have before, and a lot of eyes on this, and a lot of really great government affairs and legislative experts on this, not the least of whom are our own Greg Brown and our own Maria Spencer, our sister, right? So I think really what we're looking at in 2025, and there was a great article about this, and I'll share it with you. Maybe you can share it as a resource that I looked at not long ago. I think what we're looking at around the country, not so much nationally, are, trying to find reforms to zoning. So a really easy one would be, think about New York needing more housing. Think about the prices of rental housing in New York. We all know it's sky high. If you know nothing about New York, you know their rental prices are sky high. Think about a zoning ordinance that requires off-street parking in New York. Really, why? Where there's mass transit? Like, why? So why would you have that? And that's a barrier to development in New York. So think about in the coming few years, advocating for zoning ordinance changes that make sense, that are standing in the way of developing rental housing. And the more rental housing that we have, the more affordable it will be for the end user, of course. So think about zoning changes on the good side, but also be mindful of zoning changes that are problematic, because 40% of the cost of developing something new are the regulations and zoning impacts. So that impacts 40% of the cost of a new community or new build. I also think about rent control is out there alive and well with things moving all across the country for that. Constantly trying to advocate for rent control, which is a failed experiment, a well-documented failure. And they're still advocating for it, right? So many bills and pieces of legislation and ordinances proposed all around the country. Thank God for NAA tracking and our joint NMHC NAA efforts in this arena, and all the many affiliates around the country who are doing brilliant work to advance or defend, legislation and ordinances and things of that nature that would negatively impact our industry. So 2025, I'm thinking rent control, staying vigilant on that. I think we're recovering from the junk fee concept, but I also think that's still a thing. And I think zoning is an opportunity for us.
And if people want to get involved and advocate, there's no time like the present, because in South Carolina, our General Assembly goes back in about a week on the 14th.
January 14th. Yep. They're back on the 14th. And I have to just give a shout out to our legislators, our members of the General Assembly in South Carolina. People always want to act like you guys are just part-time. You guys are just part-time. You're getting wealthy. A senator and I think a House member, maybe both, gets paid $10,400 a year. And while they're in session 6 months, they can be called back by the governor. They were last time. So how do they have a work schedule? That's their own. How do they keep their own, trains on the tracks and their buses on the roads, so to speak, in their own lives? And in addition to that, no constituent says, oh my, they're not in session right now. I have something urgently troubling me. I will wait until January 14th to contact my member of the General Assembly. No. When they come home from the GA, they're doing as much or more work because people now know they're home. So this is year-round, $10,400 a year, and some assistance in terms of mileage and food and hotel. Like, who among us can afford to do that? So I have to give them a shout out. And the old saying about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Well, the best time to form a relationship with an elected official who can impact our business and our personal lives, because we should advocate for our own families as well, ourselves and our families. The best time to do that was 3 to 5 years ago. So start today.
And that thank you email for serving is perfect to send right now. Like, congratulations. Like, that's what I've been doing, in South Carolina on the federal level, the 3rd district seat that was held for many years by Jeff Duncan. He didn't seek re-election. So I was so excited that, Victoria, you will get this. Rick Atkins, that was on with Jeff Duncan, is now Sherry Biggs, newly elected first congresswoman from my home district.
Yes.
So she has retained Rick as her chief of staff. So we talk about Maria being our sister immediately upon finding this out, because while we're doing the work here in the district and contacting them, and she's doing the work in DC. And so I'm like, hey, guess what? Rick, my buddy, he's now with Congresswoman Biggs. Here's his contact information, because we all work this. I don't think folks know how often, especially when things are moving and in session, that we're in contact with Maria. She is busting her hump all the time for the industry.
I call her my Google friend. You know this. You've heard me say this, because when we're on a call like this, secretly, because you can't see my hands down here, I'm Googling some of what she's saying, so I keep up with what on earth is in her head.
Me
She is
too.
so smart. The members of NAA have no idea how fortunate they are to have folks like Greg and Nicole and Maria. Oh my.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're very, very fortunate to have them on our 6, just watching for things that come down the pike, because you mentioned the junk fee. The rental housing industry, I think people need to understand the differentiation here. They weren't excluded. They just weren't mentioned. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. So I think that's what you mean too, as far as like, we're going to be watching this.
Yeah, we have to stay on top of their perception of junk fees in our industry and their asks. This is the reason that we have to, advocate for our industry and develop these relationships, because the folks who are often promulgating legislation about our industry don't have any idea what we do. So one easy example for anyone listening, the White House wanted our industry to make application fees to different properties, possibly even different companies, to be portable. How does one do that? This company over here, you pay an application fee to, who then processes your application and is paying those associated team members and fees associated with that processing through all of their processing partners in their stack, right? Now you're going to go and apply over here. Maybe it's another property with the same company, but a different owner. Maybe it's an entirely different company. How do you make that portable? There's no way to make that portable. And if you don't know our industry, you don't know that that's a fact. There's no way to make that portable, right? We don't want people carrying around their own application packet, because now what supplier are we going to partner with to authenticate all those documents, right? If they walk around like it's a driver's license, how's that even going to work? And how's that not going to be subject to a massive amount of fraud? So there's no way to make certain things portable in this industry, and we shouldn't be calling things junk fees when they help our renters make choices about the services they're going to avail themselves of as our renters. Their services, benefits, and amenities. So it's totally different. That's like saying French fries at the restaurant I went to with my husband the other day are a junk fee.
Exactly. And I remember having people, potential applicants come in and, hey, I've brought my credit report, so you don't have to pull it, and having to explain, okay, thank you, because we've learned I don't want to deny anything they're trying to give me. I'll put it in the file, but I can't use this, and this is why. And I think people take for granted that our legislators know our industry just because they got placed, or then most of them have, especially on the federal level, a housing advisor. But that person is also responsible. That might be their housing / medical / and nobody is an expert like we are the experts of our industry.
Right. And our elected officials appreciate hearing from the experts in the industry. And that's what we have to be. We have to advocate for our industry, be the experts in our industry, advance legislation, defend legislation, explain why certain things are problematic to us. I remember years ago, there was an immigration ordinance that was being written in Somerville. They wanted here in Somerville, they wanted landlords to become essentially an immigration partner. They wanted us to include language in our lease that we were going to rent to folks and let them have the keys. And then we were going to send those renters to the city, and the city was going to run them through a system to make sure that they were here legally. And if they were not here legally, the language that we were required to add to the lease said we would forthright evict them from the community. And if we didn't have that language in our lease, every day we didn't have that language in our lease, they were going to charge us a $100 fine every single day. So it was this whole big thing. And so, a number of us went before the Somerville City Council, and we had offered public comments. And then one of the city council members who voted and said, I'm going to vote to advance this because I want the conversation to continue. I'm a landlord. I don't understand why this is problematic. I'll never forget calling that landlord who was not calling that member of the city council, who was not actually the city council member for the community I was managing in Somerville at the time. But because he had said, I'm a landlord, I want to understand why this is problematic. I said, well, let's meet at the property. And I walked him through the ordinance and how it would apply to the property and the business and every business like ours in the city, and how problematic this would be. And so that city council member reversed his vote. And then it became a tie. And the owner of the company I was working for had also communicated with the mayor, who would break the tie on city council. And that's how we got that turned around. Otherwise, that would have been incredibly problematic for everybody in the city of Somerville limits. And there are thousands of units out there.
Yeah. And it's so important that someone is watching these city and county council agendas. And there's agenda scrubbing software. We've talked about it for the state of South Carolina. It's in place to some extent, but even in, Fort Mill in South Carolina, the landlord registry that happened there, that now it still states, I don't know exactly the process to walk back something like that. But right now, if you are a housing provider and you're in the city limits of Fort Mill, you have to report your move outs to the city, and a certain number of them are inspected before move in. And I think what folks who aren't in our industry don't understand, we're inspecting them, and not all of them. I hear stories now, but we're not talking about the bad actors. But it's to your own advantage that you walk the units and inspect them before move in, because do you want your phone to ring with an unhappy person? I just told you how wonderful it is to live here, and then we're going to not walk your unit? Like, no. Majority of professional property managers are walking with maintenance, and hopefully even walking with the new resident over to the apartment home and showing them things like your water shutoff valve, how to change your AC filter, your smoke detector, things of that nature, just to make sure that the unit is in a livable condition and somewhere that you would want to live. So now they're having to go through the process of having someone from the city come on and inspect. So we're inspecting our units, and there wasn't a need. I can guarantee you, and you know what happened just like I do. A slumlord, likely the bad actor, that the city or county, city obviously is the city ordinance, it starts getting phone calls and complaints that, hey, this is a nuisance. It's a nuisance. And we have just upset me so badly because we have members there. We have property there. If we had known about it in advance, we could have done like what you said.
We did that in Charleston because Charleston tried the same thing. And so we worked with the city council members back and forth feverishly, including the night this was being read and decided at city council for the city of Charleston. So we talked about Somerville before. Now this is city of Charleston trying to do the same thing. And what we did was we created a carve out for any properties that were being operated by a licensed property management professional. And so there are ways to address this, but vigilance about what's going on in your backyard is so important. So yeah. Hopefully we're not burying folks in the legislative ordinance, kind of wonky space here with this. But yeah, we've had some really big wins as an industry here in South Carolina, and that's one of the losses we had. Anytime they've got an ordinance like that, at a modicum, we should create the carve out, through our relationships and our lobbying and government affairs relationships and efforts. We should create the carve out for professionally managed rentals in the state.
And that speaks to the need for more volunteers to take up the cause, because when you're operating on a primarily volunteer-led system, that person is a volunteer. They're getting paid by another company, by either an owner operator or a supplier partner, to do a different job throughout their day. So it takes all of us being at the helm. And you can sign up for the alerts, which I've done for Greenville. For here where I live, I'm in the county, not in the city, but I've signed up for both. And it'll tell you like the planning and zoning boards, like you can just click through and see what's going on. And if there's something that looks like it would be dangerous, reach out to your local apartment association and see what they have as far as advice to help. And just showing up, just being there is half the battle.
Yep. Yeah. Check and see if your local has a legislative committee and get active on that.
Absolutely. And this is the time everybody's starting up the year and to sign up for those committees and to volunteer. And if you don't know how to do this, there are folks, if you're in South Carolina, there's myself and Victoria and some others too that will be happy to help. And we definitely need more. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the affordable space. I think there's such a misconception with what affordable housing is, what it isn't, what different classifications are out there. And you spent time both conventional and on the affordable side. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did. I was a conventional property management professional for quite a number of years, and I was working for a local owner, operator, developer, and I was on a Class A, property, and got a call from my mentor and boss, and she said, we want you to go over to these two communities, and I was like, oh no. And so the first time she came to me, I said, no. And then they hired somebody to manage those communities, Section 8, 352 urban family Section 8 apartments. And they hired somebody to go over there, and it didn't turn out super great. And they came back to me again. And I was like, how many times do I get to say no before, my stock drops because I'm not willing to do the hard job for the company, right? So I showed up and I was probably 29 years old, managing 352 urban Section 8s, and I didn't know anything about HUD's project-based Section 8 program. And all of a sudden there's a staff of 9 people, which is, I'd had a staff that large before, but now I have a staff of 9 people and working in a portion of the industry that I didn't have any knowledge of. And I said, when are you going to send me for training on this program, this Section 8 stuff? And the boss said, listen, there's a book, it's about this thick. Go find it. Start taking it home and reading a little bit every single night. I'll send you for training in a couple months. If I send you today, you'll be overwhelmed. Start learning it on the ground from the people, your staff, from the book. Get going. Start paddling like a duck underwater right now where people can't see you, and then we'll send you for training later. And it was an interesting journey. And the industry had at that time, hopefully they don't now, quite the stigma about going from conventional property management to subsidized property management. The rumor was I had done something wrong and I was being sent there to be punished. It was quite the talk of the town at the time. Did you hear about Victoria? And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, it'd be cool to serve people who don't have housing options, to help take care of folks, elderly folks and disabled folks and families who need the highest caliber of living we can help give them in a subsidized setting, with the budgetary constraints. I think that's cool. I had to kind of talk myself through the decision, what's good about this, what's challenging about this. And so I hit that road and appreciated it and all the things that it gave me, because that is where my appreciation for the rules and the legislation and the laws really, hit a high level, because you have to know the regulations associated with that work to do that well. You're going to court a lot. Unfortunately, I probably participated in 200 or so evictions in the 5 years I was there. Oftentimes I would handle my own in the courtroom, and many, many times had attorneys on the other sides of the aisle. So you really have to know what you're doing and dig in. And it was an honor to serve folks. And it was really cool learning how the system functioned, to where our senior citizens didn't have to choose between their medications and their rent. Single moms or dads struggling didn't have to choose between childcare expenses and rent because of the way the formula works. Money for a disabled individual for medications or unreimbursed medical expenses of any kind, payments for childcare for working folks, those would be subtracted from their income before their rent was determined. So I really liked getting into the mathematics of it and seeing how folks were being helped and how we could help folks and really working to turn those communities around over time.
It's definitely gratifying to come in and see, like, somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to be what they need at this point in their life to help. And then once you learned how to do it, then you do what we do. You pay it forward.
Absolutely. It was really cool because, I came from the property management industry. I was working for a very professional company, very professional bosses. And I showed up looking like the professional I always had, no matter what community I was on. And I remember hearing the residents say to one another, "That's our new manager." And that gave me pride that they took pride that I was their manager. I was really well received by the good renters who were there, and really appreciate it. And again, watching folks come in the door who were at their wits' end with life, losing jobs, losing housing, and turning to the Section 8 world, watching them walk in the door with a chip on their shoulder and, stepping up, very calming and letting them know it's okay. It's okay. We're here to help. We're here to help. Take a deep breath. We're going to make sure to explain all this to you. It's okay. And we're here to work with you. And helping folks at sometimes their most difficult hours, when they've lost a job and they're facing eviction, or they are already homeless or nearly homeless or unsustainably housed with a family member where they can't stay for long. Helping folks at that point in their life was very gratifying.
And there's need for more affordable housing. And there's so much more that could be done. And I think when we talk about rent control and people, obviously it's, like you said, the largest failed study out there. The answer is building more. We need more.
When too few of anything exists and it's being chased by too many, you have a problem, whether it's housing or groceries or vehicles. That's the definition of inflation. Too few resources being chased by too many dollars, you get inflation and you get rising prices and just scarcity of supply. We want to live an abundant life and we want to help our neighbors do the same.
For sure. And I didn't realize, because I'd only worked in the conventional side. I did LIHTC for just a few months back in 2000. And I remember something about a bond report and that it was not fun. And they brought someone in to do it.
The bond housing is a different program with the State Housing Authority, because I had that. And then LIHTC is with IRS, so low-income housing tax credit. So, low-income housing tax credit communities may often have bonds through the South Carolina State Housing, and they may be working with people who hold vouchers, the tenant-based side of Section 8 through the local housing authorities. So some of these folks in property management are just downright brilliant. On a LIHTC property, navigating the IRS rules, dealing with a bond and reporting to the South Carolina Housing Authority, and then dealing with tenant-based, renter-based vouchers, which is through the local housing authority. I mean, some of these folks are managing so many relationships and systems and programs. They're just brilliant. They are to be lauded and applauded.
They're heroes that work amongst us that are helping. And I learned so much just trying to help with the Section 8 bill, as we've met with some members of our congressional delegation from South Carolina this year. One thing I learned is that once you're approved for a voucher, you've got a time clock that starts ticking, and you only have a very finite amount of time to find a place to apply that voucher. I didn't realize that the folks were in danger of losing it if they couldn't find a community that was willing to accept their voucher.
A has a graphic on this process. It's so convoluted for people working with the housing choice vouchers. Again, that's the tenant-based side of the Section 8 program. The picture depicting the process is so convoluted. This is the Choice and Affordable Housing Act that we're talking about, what Katie and I are talking about. And it's so convoluted, and it's so in need of great reforms. So, that it'll be another legislative priority.
Oh, for sure. I know I called it a spaghetti junction. Betsy Cunningham, I still want to call her Betsy Kirkpatrick. I'll have to have Betsy on one day and we'll talk too. But we were meeting in one of our meetings with Congressman Norman, because, we've had quite a few now.
I was texting with him recently when that vote was going on. I'm like, please. And thank you. Now, not everybody will get that or why I was doing that. We'll leave that lie, Katie. But I was texting with him. But before we go on, and I know we don't want to get folks too far into the legislative weeds, but if you have Betsy Cunningham on, please have her sing for you. Did you see her family singing?
Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. I mean, just tears, beautiful.
It was beautiful. She is so talented on so many levels. I love her.
She is. And she's unapologetically herself. And when you're around her, it frees you to want to do the same. We got to, I found myself to be finding neurodiversity is okay. So explain some things in my life. And so masking is part of that. And she's someone that the mask can come off. You can just be yourself and all your weirdness, and she'll sing about it. It's great. And I think she said something was bananas in pajamas. She said the bill, as far as the process, our infographic, I called it a spaghetti junction. And she's like, it's really bananas in pajamas. And that's us meeting with a member of Congress. You don't have to be some stuffy, version of yourself when you're meeting with an elected official. Just be yourself.
Yeah. Just talk about what you know. It's not hard.
Exactly.
If anybody wants to come brand new to Advocate this year, March 25th and 26th again, please reach out to one of us who've been going for, 25 years. Reach out to one of us. We'll put you on our hip, make sure you have a good time. You'll have some fun out there too, don't worry. But you'll learn. You'll meet great, brilliant people. Some of the absolute best minds in the business are at Advocate each year. So yeah, let's get ready to rumble, y'all.
That's right. We had record attendance last year from South Carolina. We had over 40 people. And if Donald Wood is listening, I will help again this year with scheduling our meetings with our members of Congress. That is an undertaking. But we also host, and we did it recorded. And your daughter, Olivia, had created a backdrop for us for I can't believe it's already almost been a year, where we have our own issues briefing, because NAA does one, but sometimes with travel plans, people can't necessarily get to the issues briefing, which is held the Tuesday afternoon prior to lobby day, which is always the Wednesday of the conference. And so we'll hold it in South Carolina, probably a couple weeks before then, so that we can get those questions answered. And if you are passionate enough about the industry, of course, if you're on a committee, you probably, you have to be there anyway to be in person at the committee meetings. But if you're passionate enough to go to DC, lobby the halls of Congress for the industry, then you're passionate enough to sit on a committee for your state or local. Because like you said, it filters down where we can make an impact on all levels.
Yeah, but they don't have to be on any of that before they go there. This may be the beginning of their journey and they want to learn. And it's great regardless of what end of the spectrum you're on. I always find it to be an amazing opportunity and love, mentoring or helping anybody I can understand the process, sitting with folks and explaining issues and what it's going to be like to meet with the staff, because you won't normally meet with the member. You remember last year we had so many people for Tim Scott, and then we were going to be meeting with a member of his staff, but then he gave us 3 to 5 minutes sitting there. I think it's called Under the Clouds in his office building, just face to face with all of us, and he could stand in the middle of the whole group and point people out and ask questions of them. And it was just great. It was a great exchange. So yeah, super cool stuff.
And that speaks to your commitment and your work in fostering that relationship that he came out. I'm not going to get emotional about it because I started, because when he stopped by, he saw you. And he's like, oh yeah, Victoria, tell me about it. Go ahead, come on. Yeah. And he did. And I got some amazing pictures of you and Michelle Lorick were able to.
Yeah. So I tag team with Michelle because Senator Scott said, I've got about 3 minutes. Give me the highlights. And I hit 2 of them and I I'm not in charge, but I hit the highlights of 2 of our topics. And then I asked Michelle, tagged her in. So, that's the other thing. If you have a relationship with somebody, help others have a relationship with them as well. So to foster that relationship for Michelle Michelle, I tagged her into the conversation because you're right. Senator Scott said, Victoria, give me the 3 minute on this really quickly. And I did 2 and then tagged Michelle in, and she got to finish and develop, work on her developing relationship with Senator Scott as well. So we all have to help each other.
And he has a very important role in the 119th.
He's got a couple of very important roles. I've been following Tim Scott's career since he was on Charleston County Council in 1995. And then he went to the South Carolina General Assembly in 2009. And then 2011, he went to the South Carolina State House. No, he went 2009 to the South Carolina State House. And then 2011, he went to the U.S. House. But then in 2013, Governor Nikki Haley appointed him to the Senate. He was filling a vacated seat with a former great senator for the state of South Carolina. He was filling his seat when Governor Nikki Haley appointed him. But since then, in 2013, Senator Scott has won election 3 times. Special election in 2014, another in 2016, and then his last one in 2022. And early on in his career, I would advocate to the NAA PAC Board of Trustees for financial support for Senator Scott, knowing while he wasn't then yet on any important committees, he would be, because I knew that was his plan. I knew what he wanted to do, and I knew he would get there. So advocating for financial support for a member, at a certain level is super important. And we began doing that for Senator Scott before he reached where he is now. And now he's the chair in this Congress of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and also the chair of the Senate Banking Committee, a very germane key committee for us in this industry.
And that's where, if folks don't know, that's where the majority of our bills go, is the Senate banking. And having him as a resource and watching him, his energy, like I've got a picture over here. I'll show you. Yeah,
I've got a flag in my living room from Senator Scott.
And just standing that close to him, his energy is palpable. Like he has I just told him, I'm unapologetically a believer. And I said, the calling on your life, sir, I can feel it. And what the Lord, at the time we thought that he was going to be VP pick, but I'm like, what the Lord has for you, no one can take away. Like, his calling is palpable if you're around.
And we still don't know what his next steps will be. But it's funny you mentioned his calling because he met his now wife at Bible study, right? So he is a fabulous, fabulous man, and his journey is very important. He celebrates being the longest serving Black member of the Senate in its 35-year history. So he's celebrating that right now based upon his current tenure. He is an amazing fellow who, had to overcome some racial prejudice in his life, in his upbringing. I think he won an officer's role in his student council that probably prior to that wouldn't have, hadn't happened. But he's always been a trailblazer, and it's lovely to see him blaze trails and have a good compass and work at doing good things. Lots of folks have one take or another on each of our elected officials, but we're not there while they're making the sausage and seeing how they're having to navigate and negotiate and what concessions they're having to make. Whenever there's something we want in life, we don't want any concessions. We want it perfect. We want it, perfect and to our liking. But they're up there in the middle of making the sausage. And so sometimes I think folks just, need to ask questions before passing any judgments as to what the final results are. And really kind of dig into the minutia and the sausage making just a little bit more, because it's tougher than I think people think.
And it's important, like you said, that we keep members of Congress in office, such as Tim Scott. And the vehicle we have to do that is the NAA PAC, which you served as a longtime PAC ambassador. And I'm just finishing up having chaired the NAA PAC Ambassadors Committee, and we came so close to hitting our goal this year, less than 100,000 away, but we'll just continue to build on that. And those funds aren't for a rainy day.
No, they're for every day. Yeah. So I chaired PAC Ambassadors and PAC. Before that, the units committee, kind of communication now, but PAC Ambassadors and PAC, lots of important work goes on there. And, if you try to think about having a conversation with, more than 530 members of Congress, was at 535. If you try to think about having a conversation with them, picture them all in a big room and you just have your voice. And then is that going to reach all the corners and all the way to the back of the room? Then put a microphone in your hand. Now can they all hear you clearly, front to back, side to side? PAC dollars are the microphone in the hands of the industry to communicate with that room full of people. And that's what PAC dollars mean. Personal contributions to a group fund, the industry's fund, to put that microphone in our hands so that we can communicate with that full room of those 535 folks and have our message heard and have it matter to some degree, right? And have us be the experts in housing because we're the ones who want to continue to earn a living in this industry. So we have to be the ones willing to work to put that microphone in our hands and then be willing to speak when it is handed to us.
And the way that this works for folks that don't know, NAA can make a donation in DC. Like Maria could absolutely walk over a PAC check. But a lot of times what we'd like to do is have an in-district meeting and host that member of Congress at one of our properties. It's a wonderful opportunity to bring and show them, which is what we've done with several. But with Ralph Norman more recently, we took him to a property that accepted vouchers, had members of the staff there to tell him what that process was. Now, they had a great relationship with their PHA, with their housing authority, but the bill's out there because there are a lot who don't. There's breakdowns and there's room for improvement. But those PAC dollars can help get them. It's not a quid pro quo. In fact, that's illegal, but it gets them to the table too. Like I would tell folks,
it's catching their attention.
Yeah.
It's catching their attention and letting them know that you're an ally and you support them. And then letting them know what our industry needs. And that was a brilliant ask of Ralph Norman, Representative Ralph Norman in particular, because we've been asking him to mark up that bill, the Choice and Affordable Housing Act, so it can be improved to the point where he'd be willing to be a co-sponsor and sign on to it. That being one of our goals and one of our asks, it was brilliant to ask him to meet you all at a property taking a housing choice voucher, because that's been the conversation. That was one of our big conversations with Congressman Ralph Norman, along with the conversation about the levels or lack thereof of profitability to our industry. When we started really looking at this, NAA came out with a graphic. There was 9 cents on the dollar left for the owners of profit in this industry. When we went to speak with Congressman Norman during the last Advocate, that 9 cents dropped by 22% to only 7 cents now. And I'll never forget suggesting to Ralph Norman, and maybe we can bring it to him this year, Katie, we should work on that, that we should give him a shadow box with that graphic, maybe in smaller form, and then glue into that box a nickel and 2 pennies, and then make a little replica of it for his table, his meeting table. Then he can push it across to folks who are coming after our industry and saying, do you want their pennies or their nickel? What is it you're looking for? Because they've got 7 cents to work with in that industry. So what is it you're trying to take? Are you going after penny number 1, penny number 2, both of those, the nickel, all 7 cents? What is it you want with your failed programs like rent control? And so that was a conversation that really caught Congressman Ralph Norman's attention when we were in his office. And so your event that you held was perfect for the person, the time, the needs we currently have. Congratulations to you guys.
And I have to give credit where it's due. Courtney Kittle with USAA, with Upper State, that was her idea. We were talking about where we were going to meet with him, and she's like, I have an idea.
Perfect, Courtney. Cheers to you, Courtney. Thank you so much.
Yes. And I think that's a great idea. I think we should absolutely have that for him this year. When the members that attended that meeting came back and said, you'll never guess what Victoria did. I'm like, oh, please tell. But they were just blown away because we can understand something if it's shown to us, if we have a physical representation. It was very impactful. And it speaks to your years of experience and being the Republican whisperer, so to speak, in a way, or just being able to communicate with these members. And you chaired NAA's legislative committee as well. And I'm sure that was an amazing. How was that?
That was years to get there. I'm really proud that I was able to do that. I was a vice chair, if you will, because you chair 2 different subcommittees for Ledge before you get to Ledge chair. And I was really proud because I had transitioned to the supplier side. And then Chairman Rick Graff allowed me as a supplier side member of the industry to hold that role that year. January 18th, I came to the supplier side. And so he did not have to let me chair the legislative committee, but Chairman Rick Graff did. And I was honored because that's not done. Right. But I had been working towards that for many, many, many years and put in all the time and the effort and loved it. And so I think, I was honored that he recognized that and allowed me to serve as the legislative chair in 2021. And it was a great experience. I remember in 2020, The chair couldn't be at a particular event because companies had already started dialing back everyone's travel. But I did make it to the 2020 Advocate. And I was interviewing the top enforcement person for HUD on the telephone, acting as the acting chair at that time for that meeting. And the room was full. And here I was talking with the top enforcement person for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and essentially having a chat with her in front of the whole room to the gain and end of benefiting relationships and outcomes for our industry. So it was a humbling experience, just a tiny bit terrifying and exhilarating by buckets.
And I was there for that. That was my first Advocate, was 2020.
Wow.
And
so you were there in the room when I was having that conversation.
Yep, I was there.
That was like, yeah.
Oh yeah. I had seen a little bit, like, cause I think we first met when you came to Upper State to talk about PAC. I remember it being a summer event, and I didn't, at that point, my legislative light bulb had not gone off that I compared it to youth and government when I was in high school. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of see how this is in the same vein. But I remember meeting you there.
It had already gone off because I remember recognizing you and Laura Hart both, I think, at that event.
Yeah, I think it's probably 2018 or so when we met, maybe even before.
I remember recognizing you both because you were already active.
Oh yeah, because I have this too. I'll have to show you on my little board here that I keep. There's our picture in the middle.
Yeah, you were recognized as a Top Gun, and I came out to the Top Gun music wearing a flight suit. Yes. It was so much fun. I had to catch the room's attention because I know they were thinking, oh my God, legislative stuff. So I came out in a Top Gun suit to the Top Gun song. I brought dog tags for two people in the room, and you and Laura Hart Williamson now, yes?
Yep.
You both received Top Gun awards because you guys were already active. Like, you grew up this way, so you were already active and Top Guns. So it was fun recognizing you both that way that day.
And just learning more about how we're just part of something so much bigger than we realize we are. And for folks that are there every day, you're doing your job and you're going home, and that's well and good. But there comes a time that you see, okay, we're not here for a long time. The good Lord puts us here, and it's like that, whatever happens with our life, and we're not here anymore. And so we've got to do the very best it is with the time that we have here to make a positive impact on the world. And if this is the industry that provides a roof over our own heads, whether that's in rental housing or if we own, or if we are just a supplier on the other side helping make those operations go, this is our industry. It's worth putting back into.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's a job, it's a job. If it's not something you intend to keep for long, I get it. But if this is your industry, if this is your career, at a certain point, you have to step up. You can't take from something without giving back to it. And just the 8 to 5, and none of us work 8 to 5, right? So let me not act like I don't get that, because I started as a leasing agent and worked on site for many years. But if it's a job, it's one thing, I get it. But if this is your career, you have to give back to the industry. You have to protect the industry. You have to help people who make rules about it understand things. It's, and it's also about enjoying your day to day. I get that. But it's also about, being on everybody's six. Your boss, if you're in this industry and it is your industry and it is your career field, you want to advance in this career field and you want opportunities and options. But legislation can shut a lot of that down, bad legislation. So we've got to do our part, and it can be super fun. I've got some great memories of different events like that, having my Upper State Top Guns, having the most fun listening to the French pastry chef from the White House who served several presidents, and hearing his stories and watching him prepare, a fabulous baked treat for all of us, at a PAC event. There's wonderful times as well as lots of work. So join in for both. We're all made for it in this business.
Oh yeah. If you can lease an apartment to a complete stranger,
yeah,
you can have a conversation about the industry that you work in and are an expert at with an elected official. It's that easy. And it's, like I said, it's fun. Nerds like us really think it's fun and get involved and go on to chair and lead. But then we have to have someone coming behind us that we can pass the baton to when it's time for their leg of the race. And it's it's so important that we pay it forward. And I look to you as a mentor and, a sister in Christ and someone who I aspire to be more like and to learn from. And I know our listeners will as well. And if you guys are not following Victoria on all the socials and on LinkedIn, definitely connect. And if your company does not use pet screening, please. And if you would like, tell them just a little bit about before we have to log off, because I know you have another call coming up.
I do. But thank you for that opportunity. So I'm at Pet Screening, and literally that's what we do. We help our clients by screening their pets, processing their assistance animal accommodation requests, providing them with data and business intelligence in a manner that is a comprehensive risk and revenue management partnership. And so we're providing with all that risk and revenue management that they need in this whole area of pets and assistance animals. And our services are free to our property management partners. We do not charge the folks that we work with, and we're working with the property management pros in this country, serving more than 7 million rentals now in the country. And the whole headache of assistance animals and processing that for folks, that whole challenge, because that's an interweaving of 3 different pieces, the legislation, the DOJ impact, as well as the HUD notices. We're all over that. We're tops in that. We're the first and best in class in the business. So we're the ones who'll process your assistance animal accommodation request for you, screen every pup like that one you've got at your house, my kitties at my house. So we truly deliver. There's renter screening and there's pet screening, and we truly deliver a screening for each pet. It's just a brilliant, brilliant solution that John Bradford came out with. And the fact that we're able to offer it to our clients without charging them, there's a small fee to pet parents that no pet parent minds. But the fact that we're able to offer that free to our clients in this industry is just a really unique and brilliant business model. Again, it's risk management, revenue management around all things pets and assistance animals. Takes work off the hands, adds time back to the hands, and it's done in such a way that's very mindful of the disability community while also being mindful of the owners and the operators and what they have a need and right to as well. The way we do our work, folks will end up with better data, much better data, and be able to make great business decisions from that business intelligence that they want, and that revenue, that enhanced revenue, because we're going to be documenting more pets for you than you have now. This industry has more than 51 million pets living in rentals in this country, a number that's at least that high. When you think about the number of renters that we have across the country, I think I read an article or a report, I'm grabbing it right now, 45.2 million renters in this country. And with the rate of pet ownership, that translates into more than 51 million pets. Like, you need a partner for that, and it's us at Pet Screening, and we're not going to charge you. So Victoria at petscreening.com, let me get you in touch with whomever is your person on our team and get you going, because this takes problems off your hands.
For sure. And Max and Charlotte, my border collie and my miniature Sheltie, are singing the song of their people out there in agreement. That
They are. But thank you for having me, Katie. I can't thank you enough for welcoming me to The Real Still. Before we go, because I know you're a music girl, I have to tell you, you had asked me once, my favorite song. And I don't know that I have an absolute favorite, but I'm just going to tell folks out there right now, I'm loving Teddy Swims. His voice is just so raw. Funeral, lying in your arms, what a way to go, is one of the lines in that song. And I think that is just fabulous. I'm also a huge, believe it or not, I want to surprise people, I'm a huge Jelly Roll fan. And if you have not listened, because I think it's probably one that's a little bit less of his popular songs, Halfway to Hell, Jagged Edges on My Halo is part of one of the lines in there. And he talk about real and raw. You get that when you listen to Jelly Roll. On my Christian side, since you're my sister, if you've not listened to Austin French, I highly encourage you to listen to Austin French for you or any of your listeners out there. I think Freedom Hymn is my favorite song that Austin has. It talks about the chains are broken, the soul's forgiven, the past is gone. It's super, super great. If I'm heading out for a run and I want to really bounce myself out onto that run, it's Austin French that I'm listening to. He's a great Christian artist. So from Teddy Swims and Jelly Roll to Austin French, I listen to everything. So I don't know that I have an all-time favorite, but there's a sample of what's on my playlist.
That's awesome. It's awesome. I love the variety. Love
Yeah.
the variety. And thank you again for joining me today on this episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And I know we'll talk again. You're welcome. Open invitation to come back. We could do this all day.
Well, maybe we need to do a post-advocate or a pre-advocate. Maybe the issues briefing needs to be on The Real Spill.
I would love that. And I bet we could twist the arm of one Mrs. Betsy Cunningham. She has her between two plants.
Yeah.
I bet that we could get her to come on and help too. So folks, be on the lookout for that. We're going to make it happen.
Great. I appreciate the open invitation, and I send it right back to you. I hope to be an open resource for anything I can help you with. You guys have a fabulous rest of your day to all the listeners, and you as well, Katie, and to your pups in the background. So thank you for having me again.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work together with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something new. Now, go be a voice. Until next time, Spills out.